Welcome to another cross-border talk, where we point our attention to a very curious case in Romania of a golden mine project which gathered a lot of passions over the years, and it was at some moment the protests for this golden mine projects were called protests of a generation, or the political project of a generation. So this is the Roșia Montana gold mine project, and just recently in this month, March of 2024, an arbitrage court in the USA decided that Romanian state does not have to pay compensation for the fact that it basically stopped the implementation of the concession for golden mining in Roșia Montana. Today we are going to speak with a person who is very much admired by all the activists of Roșia Montana protests. This is Stephanie Roth, a Swiss-French journalist and ecological activist who has been involved with the Roșia Montana movement since 2002, and she has been involved very much in the strategy and tactics of this movement. Stephanie, we are glad to have you here, and I pass now the word to my colleague Małgorzata, who asked the first question.
Yeah, and before the first question is asked, I would like to say thank you to Stephanie for being with us. And and I would like to ask about your first reaction, a very spontaneous first reaction when you heard what the arbitration court decided, that there is no compensation we will be paid by Romania. How did you feel? What did you think?
Mm-hmm. Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me here today. So that moment when we heard the results, there was a huge relief, an incredible relief. I mean, it was so heavy, what was on our shoulder. Just days, hours before the verdict was announced, the Romanian media and the Romanian state were continuing a propaganda campaign that they started on 1st of February, saying that Romania will lose the case and that Romania might have to pay $6.7 million compensation. And it was a very aggressive campaign organized by the Romanian state, who is going into an election campaign. And they were, of course, pointing the finger at us and saying that the activists are guilty and the activists should pay. And they were pointing it at the UNESCO nomination of 2001. This is when Roșia Montana was nominated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And they said that the politicians who supported this were corrupt and bad. And so that was for you to understand the context in the weeks or in the hours up to the award. So there was a huge relief, but it's a bittersweet decision for us because, you know, for 8 years we have been fighting in the courts, in the arbitration courts, because we submitted 3 interventions to the arbitration court. They're called amicus curiae, and we submitted 3 of them, and the court case lasted 8 years. And Romanian courts had previously already annulled the gold mine and the permitting procedure. And now for 8 years, the suffering of the people of Roșia Montana continued until the private arbitration court took a decision. So, of course, we are very happy that Romania doesn't have to pay compensation, but it's a bittersweet decision because Roșia Montana wouldn't have had to wait for 8 years to start living a normal life in dignity. It was bittersweet, relieved and bittersweet.
Okay, if we could now go back to the very beginning of this story, what were the stakes? What were the project? What did the mining project comprise when it was first presented? And why it was so important to stop it?
In April 2002, I visited for the first time Roșia Montana. Back then I was a journalist, and I visited the place and I spoke to the locals. Engineers, they had all worked in a nearby mine, so they were experts in mining, and they showed me the mine. It was a mine that was supposed to make the maximum profit for the company, and the mine proposed to use huge amounts of toxic cyanide to separate the gold from the ore. And if you remember, in 2002, I think there was a huge accident in Romania at Baia Mare, where cyanide spilled into the environment, and it caused the death of tons and tons of fish, and it decimated the living income of fishermen, and it polluted the Danube into Hungary and into neighboring countries. And this had happened in Romania just a few years previously. And the company had declared bankruptcy and had left overnight. Experience, they don't have any mine anywhere else in the world. They just exist for Roșia Montana. They've never done a mine. So they wanted to build Europe's largest open cast gold mine in Roșia Montana with no experience. And they wanted to use huge amounts of cyanide. And from a technical point of view, in order to develop the mine, they needed to relocate the local population that lives there. And this population are farmers, and they were given their lands, and they go from their lands, they get a much more stable income than working in a company. So they wanted to stay and work their lands. They didn't want to leave. And the government abandoned them and wanted Gabriel to expropriate them. And that was, I think, a very high price to pay. And also, in order to make the mine, they would have had to cut down all the trees. There are lots of forests around Roșia Montana. They would have had to cut down all the forests. They wanted to deviate 2 rivers, and that is against the EU Water Framework Directive. And also, gold has been mined in Roșia Montana since the Roman times, they left a lot of archaeological heritage behind that is quite unique in the world. We have kilometers of tunnels in the mountains that date from Roman times, and we also have temples and funeral places that date from Roman times. And they would have had destroyed all that because the gold lay exactly where the people live and where you have the archaeological artifacts, and also where you have the river and the nature. And they would have had to take all of that away to create huge craters, you know, several kilometers wide and several kilometers deep. And they wanted to excavate 13 million tons of rock per year. And that is a huge amount, 13 million tons, you know. That's, I don't know how many elephants it would be, I don't know, millions of elephants. And they wanted to use cyanide every day. And they wanted to use huge amounts of cyanide. And these are very risky. And and so that seemed a very high price to pay. And so that is why it was so important to stop the project for the people, for the nature, and for the heritage, and against greed.
Yeah, you said against greed, and we know that the project was stopped because of the mass protest that happened. That Vladimir will ask you about their strategy and tactics in a moment, but I would like to mark one fact. If there were protests, then it means that the project actually had supporters in Romanian political elite of that time. So if the project was if the whole mining project was so detrimental to nature, also to historical heritage of Romania, why anybody would like to endorse it? What is your point on that?
So, well, first of all, you know, Romania is known for its corruption. And I would argue that this was also the case in Roșia Montana. So, for example, in 2010, the Ministry of Culture made a deal, a contract with Geber Resources, and they wanted to have $70 million from Geber Resources, the Romanian Ministry of Culture, and in return for the $70 million, they would give them all the permits for Roșia Montana that otherwise, under law, they were not able to get. Okay, so this is the first thing. The second thing is that in Roșia Montana, we had a company called Roșia Montana Gold Corporation. And Roșia Montana Gold Corporation is a joint venture between the Romanian state, owning just a little under 20%, and Geber Resources owning the rest. And so what happens many times when mining companies come into a country and they want to build a big project, and they know that there's likely going to be some shit hitting their fan, what they tend to do, they tend to make a joint venture with a government, because then the government gets all the permits for them and all the things, and they hope that they can keep everything under the lid so that people don't hear about the mine, right? And they try to do everything under the table quickly between the state and the company. And then only once the mine is green lighted, then they tell the people, but then it's too late, right? And this was also the case in Roșia Montana. There was a lot of corruption, right? And there was this joint venture, and the joint venture meant that the Romanian government declared Geber Resources as a strategic partner, and that's why every authority automatically put the stamp on every permit without thinking. That is how it happened.
Okay, what you did and your team or your cooperators, colleagues did was a wide-ranging campaign. I want you to present us something more about the tactics and the strategy of the campaign which you consulted, and in what ways it was successful. What were the successes or the great realizations of this campaign?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So the campaign to save Roșia Montana has always been the largest campaign in Romania ever since 2002. And this is because before it, nothing much existed in terms of protests or campaigns, right? So throughout the time, it was always big. This has now changed since Roșia Montana was the revolution of our time, and it inspired a lot of young people and elderly people in Romania. And now they tend to go much more often into the streets and start big demonstrations. But until Roșia Montana, that was not the case. And so Roșia Montana organized many actions and many demonstrations from 2002 to 2013, and they were always the biggest of their time. So how did it all start? Very simple. I moved to Roșia Montana in 2002 because local farmers asked me to come and help with their campaign because they were busy looking after their lands, and they couldn't sit in front of a computer and check the share price and do strategies. And so I moved to Roșia in 2002, and I was very lucky because I met a lovely girl there called Stefania. She was a student from Cluj, and she always also wanted to come and help. And so we both moved into a house in Roșia Montana, and we started to strategize. So it goes like this. At the beginning, there was nothing apart from the local opposition. And so we had to build we had to increase our partnership, our strategic reach. And so we had to find strategic partners. So the problems of the project of Geber Resources were environmental, the cyanide and the destruction of the forest. They were social because of the forced relocation of the people, right? They were economic because the true cost of the mine is a loss for Romania and not a gain, right? They were heritage because of destruction of the cultural patrimony of Roșia Montana. And what was the other one? Social, environmental, cultural, and economic. Yeah, those were the big problems. And so we started by building partnerships with experts in all of these things. Okay, so for the environment, we approached Greenpeace. Greenpeace Central Eastern Europe. And so Greenpeace Central Eastern Europe in 2002 made a visit to Roșia Montana, and they became one of our closest buddies and friends. And they are also our partners now in the court case at the Washington Tribunal. Okay, so that was the environmental side. And then we looked at the archaeological or cultural side. So we went to Hungary, where they have ICOMOS, because ICOMOS Romania was not that strong at that time, or we didn't know them. So we went to ICOMOS in Hungary. But luckily also, there were also some amazing archaeologists in the city of Cluj, and professors such as Mr. Piso and others. And they were also against the project. And so they also helped us. They also joined our campaign. And then for the economic thing, we went to the University ASE in Bucharest. And we made partnership with ASE, who is very strong on economics. And then they made assessments on the true cost of the mine. And so this is how we then built the arguments, and we built the case for Roșia Montana so that people could understand the different problems. You know, as citizens, we don't sort of like think only in one way. We don't think in silos. We have many things that we think about. So we wanted to really build an argument that everybody could understand, whether you are interested in the environment, in culture, in all of it together, etc. And then we created a website. And then we started with making requests of access to information to the local town hall in Roșia Montana. We wanted to have access to all the documents, to the contracts, to all the things that had happened, so that we could understand better the case. And in those days, Romania didn't like to give you access to documents. So many times we still had to go to court to be given access to those documents. But we were incredibly lucky, and that was that lady who had moved in with me, Stefania Simeon, is a legal genius. There is no one as smart as she is. And so Stefania started our sort of like legal division, and she was the one in charge that took care of all these legal aspects. And so what happened is that we started protests on the streets in Bucharest, etc. And after some time, we realized that the government was patting us on the shoulder and was saying, "Oh yeah, thank you so much for coming, but actually, goodbye." And so we saw that we didn't have there was no change, right? And so we saw that we have to do other things. And so we started to sue the Romanian government. Permit after permit that they issued. This was the largest gold mine in Europe that they wanted to develop. And so you can imagine that you need a lot of permits, not only environmental permits, you need archaeological permit, electricity permit, water permit, all the permits in the world. And when the authorities who were as corrupt with Gabriel put the stamps on all the permits, my friend Stefania took them to court and sued them. And she was very good, and she annulled all the permits. And that was the biggest problem for Gabriel Resources, because they wanted to start to mine the gold in 2003. And by 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, no bloody gold. And that was because we stopped them in the courts. Or my friend Stefania did all that work. She was very successful, and she managed to stop Gabriel Resources, or RMGC, Roșia Montana Gold Corporation, in the courts. And at the same time, we continued to make protests. We went to the Canadian embassy because Canada, Canadian mining company, we did all kinds of things. But, there was huge political pressure because this was going to become the largest mine in Europe. There was a huge amount of money. The Gabriel Resources was pressuring the government. The Canadian ambassador was pressuring the government, was going in and out of government meeting and was yelling and was saying that if we don't get the mine in Romania, then Canada will walk away from Romania. Threatening with diplomatic outrages and things. I mean, wow. And so in 2010-11, when the environmental impact assessment procedure was ongoing, Gabriel Resources went to the Romanian government and said, okay, we want to bloody mine, and you have to get your ass in gear. And The Romanian government said, well, we're sorry, we can't give you the permit for the mine because your project is against the EU Water Framework Directive, and it is also against several Romanian heritage laws, and we can't expropriate people for a commercial project. And so they decided to declare the project of overriding national interest. Because when you declare something of overriding national interest, just as is the case with your Autobahn, you know, then you don't need any environmental permits, you can just do it. And in 2013, Victor Ponta, the prime minister of the time, put out a draft bill that was to declare Roșia Montana of national interest, and hence they could expropriate the local people, they could destroy the archaeological heritage, and they could circumvene the EU Water Framework Directive. And this is when the people took to the streets, because it was a law that was only made for one company, Gebel Resources. And you make laws either for everybody or for no one. And so that upset the people a lot. And they took to the streets. And also many people had come to Roșia Montana since 2014 and earlier, since 2004. Time goes so 10 years are very fast, because each year we would organize a huge music festival, an event at Roșia Montana called Filmfest, for young people to come to Roșia Montana and see this beautiful place. And so hundreds and thousands of people came and saw that beautiful place and fell in love with it. And when in 2013 the special law was proposed, they took to the streets and they came out to defend their friends in Roșia Montana and defend the place that they loved so much from coming here in the summer. And that is a very long story. I'm sorry. There you go.
It was really amazing when in 2013 a coalition of very different type of people gathered to protest in the name of Roșia Montana. So you had civic type of people, you had ecologists. I dare say you have even patriots, Romanian nationalists, if you wish, who were somehow skeptical of foreign capital. And they were really the protest of a generation, as they say. And I think it's fair to say that the party which later appeared, called Union Save Romania, also was born as some kind of a follow-up of these protests, because during these protests people were gathering and discussing and looking for some change, let's say. So I want to ask you also about that. How do you appreciate the heritage of Roșia Montana protests over the last 10 years? What is in fact this heritage? What did the Roșia Montana protest change for Romania?
Well, I feel very uneasy to answer that question, because I'm not Romanian, and I guess only a Romanian could tell you how important the protests have been for them. But I can tell you, as a campaigner and as a woman and as a person who lived for 10 years in Roșia Montana at a time when realities there was a war, because you have to imagine that the company tried to make everybody leave, and they put brother against brother and sister against sister so that they can get their lands and things like that. And it was a real war that we lived in Roșia Montana. That's without any exaggeration. And I lived there for 10 years in those days. And I can tell you that as a woman and as a campaigner and as a person who lived with the locals of Roșia Montana for such a long time, right? The solidarity and the insistence and the stubbornness of people from so many wide sectors of Romania to come to the rescue or to come to support the fight of the local people is the most beautiful moment in my life. You know, I mean, so I don't know. I mean, they are a huge inspiration for me. And if I was able to fight or to keep going after all that time until the verdict on last Friday, then it is because I can still see all these beautiful faces in front of me who believed in Roșia Montana and who were stubborn and who took risks and took to the streets and who united saved Roșia Montana.
Okay, you mentioned that these were very moving, really emotional moments for you, and I want to finish our episode on Roșia Montana story, asking you about what's next in your life of a campaigner, activist, fighter for change? You have been involved not only in Roșia Montana, but also in other projects or fights in Romania, and also you have been TTIP protester, if I may say, or coordinator even on European level against the TTIP, this free trade agreement. So I have the feeling you have in the blood the instinct to fight for social causes. What's now next for you, now that Roșia Montana seems to be behind?
Mm-hmm. It's a very, very nice question. Yes. So on a personal level, I always said already when I was young that I want to move to Roșia and I want to get old there. And I want all my friends to be able to, I want to find a home there. And then I want all my friends and everybody who ever helped Roșia Montana, if they need a home, that this would be their home too. And so this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to find a house in Roșia Montana because hopefully there will be lots of houses for sale now that the project has been abandoned. And I will buy a house and maybe another one next door to it. And I will open it to campaigners and to friends who need moments of resting, who need good friends, or who need shelter. And I want to live in Roșia Montana until the end of my days, and which I hope will be still many years ahead. And then in the meantime, I would like to rebuild Roșia Montana because Gabriel Resources depopulated the area and they bought lots of houses, which are monuments, but they let them degrade. And so now we want to restore Roșia Montana and we want to make the place accessible for lots of tourists to come. Roșia Montana today is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And so hopefully this will bring a lot of guests. And I think that it's the heritage and the people and the nature that are the true gold of Roșia Montana. And I hope that a lot of people will come, including you, and visit us. And if you wait until I have a house, you will have a bed, you will have a table, you will have to eat. Yes, and we shall live and celebrate life. And if there are any fights in the meantime that are worth fighting, and if I still have energy in me, then I will also try and support any other fight that needs help. That's how I see, that's my vision.
That's a beautiful message of solidarity and praise of life, that I am really happy that we will be having these words on Cross Border Talks podcasts. I wish you indeed many years in Roșia Montana in Romania. I wish you to see Roșia Montana flower again. I wish you to see everything that is beautiful and that was destroyed to be restored and to be seen by people from all around the world. And I am sure that among these visitors, there will be also me and Vladimir on one day. So
wonderful.
Thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you to everybody who listened to this cross-border talk. I just remind you at this point that cross-border talks are to be seen and heard on both YouTube and SoundCloud, Spotify, and other social platforms. And you can also subscribe to our website directly so that you never miss a new publications. Stephanie Roth, an activist who helped to save Roșia Montana and who helped to organize one of the biggest examples of solidarity in Romania and in the Balkan region of last decades, was our guest today. Thank you very much and see you again.